Here. I'm going to try to keep this one to 10 or 15 minutes. I made a long one yesterday. I think I sent it out to you, and it just took forever to send out. So my hope is to get this thing made and then get it out to you. And as I get a little more proficient with this, I will try to make longer videos. Okay, so we're looking at freedom of speech. Okay, so can I make that bigger? Can I make it bigger one more time? All right. Okay, so remember, there we go, isn't that quick? All right, so remember yesterday we talked about freedom of religion. So we're looking at civil liberties. Civil liberties is where you want protection from the government. You want the government to leave you alone. So like right now, the big civil liberties issue is people, don't want the government telling them what to do about how often they can go out. And, there's this balance, that the government's got to strike between our individual liberty and the public interest. The problem of collective action is really what we're looking at right now. All right, but we're looking at freedom of speech here. So last time we looked at freedom of religion. And then we said, hey, there's two clauses in the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause. That says the government basically can't promote religion in any way. And the Free Exercise Clause says the government can't tell you what to do in church beyond don't do illegal stuff in church. If it's illegal outside church, it's legal inside church. All right, so that's kind of the rule of thumb on that. So now we're looking at freedom of speech. And so, the rule of thumb here is you can't hurt anybody. You can't say anything that's going to get somebody hurt. So, mafia bosses who put out a hit on somebody, say, hey, well, I'm just freedom of speech when I said to kill that guy. Well, it's a big deal. You can't say something that's clearly going to get somebody hurt. So our court case on this starting out is Schenck versus the U.S. World War I, Schenck was anti-war. He was an anti-World War I guy, so he's passing out these leaflets saying people should dodge the draft. And so he got arrested, so his case went to the Supreme Court, and his conviction got upheld. But in this case, one of the associate justices, it wasn't the Chief Justice, Associate Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes goes down as one of the great justices in history, even though I don't believe he was ever Chief Justice. He comes up with this thing called the clear and present danger test. You can't say something that's clearly going to get somebody hurt right away. All right. So the example of that is shouting fire in a movie theater. You shout fire, and movies were just getting started. So movies were kind of the public gathering, if we can use today's language, that was on everybody's mind at the moment. So you say fire in a movie theater, everybody gets in a panic, they go running out of the theater, and somebody gets trampled. So your words could clearly get somebody hurt right away. So you're liable for that. You're responsible for that. So another example would be a shot, saying bomb on an airplane, saying some guy next to you's got a bomb, and he's going to get beat up. If you say that. So there's the clear and present danger test. All right. So what's the big deal about speech? The court and scholars have looked at speech for a number of reasons. First reason is it's necessary for the protection of other rights. Martin Luther King can't do his thing if he can't make an I have a dream speech. Abraham Lincoln, can't inspire us if he doesn't have freedom of speech. So all our great leaders need speech in order to fight, for the other things that, we all believe in. So it's necessary for the protection of all the other rights. So it's kind of the first among all these civil liberties. All right, second thing, self-expression. If you ever got something on your mind and you feel like that thing's getting stifled because people disagree with you, people don't approve of you, you're going to get in trouble if you say it. That'll weigh on you. And so we have a need to express ourselves and to convey what we see as the truth to everybody else, and kind of to be heard. So self-expression is a big deal. We feel frustrated if we can't describe the truth as we see it. All right, and then finally, the marketplace of ideas. We're all better off if the people with the best ideas have a chance to express these ideas and for truth to defeat untruth. All right, so the best ideas have got to be expressed if we're going to solve our problems. The worst ideas, if the worst ideas are the only ones that have a chance of being expressed, well, then the best ideas can't defeat them. So just like when you go to the store, you pick what you think's the best product. When you're listening to the debate, you want to hear the best ideas. All right, so those are the three reasons speech is just a big idea. So I don't know. That's not a very good picture right there. That's supposed to be a marketplace, and they need to do something else with that. But so that's the marketplace of ideas notion. Okay, so here's an interesting slide. The court has ruled you can be a Nazi, but you can't be a communist. Isn't that interesting? All right, so in 1951, at least at certain times in our history, 1951, you got the Dennis versus U.S. case. This was, McCarthy era. Everybody's freaked out about the Cold War. China had been communist for 2 years. 40% of the world's population gone communist. So you weren't allowed to be a communist in the United States. And so people got, 10 guys got thrown in prison for being communist. So one of them, Dennis, sues, and, the court kind of rules that his ideas are clear and present danger. The communists want to overthrow the government. If the government gets overthrown by communists, you get a dictatorship and no more freedom of speech. So the danger of these particular ideas, the court says, justifies, taking away civil liberties in that particular context. This is also a situation, and we skipped a few things on the court, and I may come back to it, kind of depending on how long we're out, yada, yada, yada. But we see in history that the court, although these guys are supposed to be impartial, and they're influenced by public opinion. So, the Korematsu case in World War II, if you remember that one, hey, the court upruled the internment camps. I mean, the judges were obviously had the current events on their mind. Their judgment got distorted a little bit. So in this case, the judges are really, really anti-communist, concerned by the spread of communism. So it's almost kind of a containment decision. But the conviction of communists were upheld. All right. This next one, hey, look it up. We'll check the date on it. I think it's I'm going to put it in 1962, something like that. So a little bit more liberal court. This is the Warren Court. But it's Brandenburg versus Ohio. And this guy, Brandenburg, one thing you got to figure out is the names. Remember the names on these things. So Brandenburg's German looking name there. But at any rate, this Nazi was making a speech, and he says, we need to pretty soon go take over Washington, D.C., and just let everybody know that we're right and they're stupid. But he didn't say exactly when. He didn't say we're going to bomb the White House next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And so for that reason, his conviction got thrown out. The Supreme Court said you're allowed to generally espouse these views as long as you don't say when you're going to carry out this action. So it's the replacement of clear and present danger. It's a little more specific. Imminent lawless action. So, the moral of the story, somebody, I think last year, I hadn't even thought about it, but the moral of the story, somebody said this means you can be a Nazi in the United States, but you can't be a communist. And, the answer to that is, yeah, kind of, depending on the year. I imagine, the court might have made a different decision in 1951 as opposed to the 1960s here, but the Nazis were allowed to do it. Nazis going to win in these court cases here. All right. Okay, so take a look at it. So, hey, 1 down, 3 to go. Like I said, I'm kind of itching to make a longer video here. But given my experience yesterday with the APUSH video, it took 3.5 hours. So I'm not quite ready to do that, because I want to get this thing out to y'all this morning. All right, so clear and present danger is the first one. The Schenck case is the clear and present danger. Well, Main regulation, can't hurt somebody. All right, so Holmes, after the Shank case, says clear and present danger. All right, so then those three reasons, it's necessary. It's a necessary condition for the exercise of other rights, self-expression, in the marketplace of ideas. All right, then you got, hey, I need another question there. What's the communist case and the Nazi case? So the communist case is Dennis. The Nazi case is Brandenburg. All right, here we go. Number 2. Let's see. This thing's been pretty good, so I'm going to run a risk right here. Let's see if I can. Let's see. Can I? Look at there. Okay, we'll make it a number 2. And I think this thing's been pretty quick. It's been like, let's see how long it takes this time. Look at that. I mean, that's just awfully quick. All right, symbolic speech. All right. We didn't watch all the Scalia. What happened? I think we watched maybe a little bit of the Scalia video the last day where half of the class was in there. But the Scalia video had a section on that. I'll try to send that to you. I'll send that Scalia video to you. He's really interesting. But at any rate, flag burning. This was an 80s case. Texas versus Johnson. The 84 Democratic Convention, I believe, is in Houston. Guys stand outside that convention. He's burning the American flag, and I mean, look at my screwed up. I had a bunch of other pictures on there, and that's what that white is. So I'm botching that one. All right, but so they arrested him, and so as I recall, what happened first was his lawyer said, "Well, there's not a law against flag burning," so they had to let him out of jail. So Texas gets all fired up, and they passed a law against it. All right, and he like burns the flag again, or somebody else burns the flag. So then it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, well, it's symbolic speech. All right, he's not setting a flag on fire and then throwing it at somebody. He's not going to catch somebody on fire here. So there's no clear and present danger. There's no imminent lawless action. He's conveying an idea standing outside the Republican convention, and Johnson was mad about Reagan's policy in Central America concerning the Cold War, the Contras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, that sort of thing. And so the Supreme Court and Scalia, the most conservative member of the court, agreed with the majority decision, voted with the majority that this is symbolic speech. It's a powerful way of conveying this message. All right, there we go. So the black armbands is Tinker. All right, so let's take a look at Tinker, because I think the picture of Tinker is kind of interesting. Tinker case. All right, let's see if we get a picture. There she is. I like that one. And so take a look at her. So the Tinker case this is a 60 case. It's a Vietnam War case, and hey, that picture up there, that must be her now. I want to kind of read. I'm wanting to read about Tinker now. All right, but it's kid y'all's age, younger probably. She's showing up to high school with a peace armband during Vietnam. And the Des Moines school system says, hey, you can't do that. And her brother did too. All right, so brother and sister. And so the Tinker sued and it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled on their behalf, so symbolic speech wins again. That a peace armband's not hurting anybody, it's not creating imminent lawless action, and it's not a clear and present danger, and it is conveying their opposition to the war. All right, now take a look at how clean cut they are. So they're not hippy-dippy looking, they're not really provocative in the way they're expressing themselves. Their t-shirt they don't have a t-shirt that says, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Didn't say soldiers in Vietnam or baby killers, which would have caused a fight in the classroom. So because, the way they're expressing themselves is very, very civil and kind of calm, it's not a problem. All right, so we go back, all right, and so that's the picture that should have showed up there. All right, Mackenzie, you're stupid. How come your pictures have disappeared? I don't know. It's because I'm stupid. All right. Okay. So the symbolic speech that is regulated, that's not allowed, also coming out of Vietnam, and it's burning draft cards. So that guy doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go to Vietnam, so he's burning his draft card. But that's messing with him. That's government property. Like the Johnson guy was burning his own flag that he had bought, not the flag of the some government officer or something like that. And it's interfering with the draft. It's preventing the government from doing its job. So in that sense, the interest in the government being able to fight the war effectively outweighs the civil liberty of not to. He's not just saying, he can hold his sign that says, I don't like Vietnam, but he can't refuse to go to the draft, go to war, and so he's not allowed to burn the draft card. All right. Okay, so then you've got freedom of assembly. So we've got symbolic speech and we got freedom of assembly, and so it's time. What can the government regulate? So there's our Birmingham picture, and so we're pretty familiar with this one. Government can regulate time, place, and the conditions and manner of a protest. All right, so you can't protest out there on the interstate. That's going to shut down traffic. You can't protest in the courtyard of the school while we're at school. That's going to distract everybody from the school day. All right, you can't protest in somebody else's yard. You're on their private property. All right, so you apply for a permit. The government tells you when. A lot of times it's like Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Downtown somewhere, maybe in a park. We're not going to disrupt business. And you got conditions. You got to have police with you to protect you in case somebody attacks you. So, several times in the last years, there's been white supremacist Klan marches, Nazi marches, neo-Nazi marches, and local governments take heat from citizens saying, you're going to let these people march, and they say, well, we're not allowed not to. We have to give them a permit. All right, so this guy is getting attacked, and he's going to get thrown in jail. Obviously the German Shepherd's going overboard, and that kind of spurred Kennedy to put pressure on Kennedy to propose the Civil Rights Act. But the premise of the Birmingham March was that if these kids marched without a permit, they would fill up the jails and then shut down the jails, and Birmingham would have to negotiate. So they're trying to get arrested by disobeying this permit thing. All right, well, here comes the Nazis again. Nazis winning again. All right, so this time, and I want to read this book. This book looks really, really good to me. The Nazis came to Skokie, Illinois. All right, Skokie, Illinois was a town that had a large Jewish community, and they wanted to not march in the new Jewish neighborhood. All right, and so the city commission of Skokie wouldn't give them a permit. All right, and the argument was, it's clear and present danger. There's going to be a fight break out, and so somebody's going to get hurt. Kind of plausible argument, but the court ruled it's not because you're worried about a fight, it's because you don't like Nazis. Nazis are bad, you don't want them protesting, but, what's kind of the test of free speech? It's not free speech if, the person you agree with is talking. It's free speech if the person you can't stand what they're saying is talking. So what was it? It's I believe the guy's name's Voltaire. French philosopher. He says, I hate what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. So that's the court ruling that, so here the court's saying you can't be messing with the content. All right. And so time, place, conditions, not content. All right. So, it seems to me here we've got, so we have a Klan march, African American have to watch, and we got an African American policeman having to protect the Klan members because you can't regulate content. So, the Klan in this instance has complied with the time, place, and conditions requirement for their march. Okay, time, place, conditions, not content. Skokie couldn't stop them. All right, so here we got number 3. All right, on this one, my picture's dated. This guy is the coach. He just signed a contract to become the coach of Miss State, I think. He's a new SEC coach. He's been the coach of Washington State. I believe his name is Rick Leach. Once upon a time, he was coach of Texas Tech. All right, so let's define our words here, and then we'll tell the story of Leach at Texas Tech. All right, so freedom of the press. So libel is the crime of knowingly printing lies about a public figure. Printing it, in the newspaper or on the internet, something like that. Publishing it, people are reading it. All right, slander is the crime of knowingly saying it about a public figure on the news, in public, where everybody's going to read it. All right, so this guy was a real successful coach at Texas Tech. His team beat Texas real famously when Texas was really good. And things were going good for him, but then apparently he was a mean coach. And so this kid, who was the son of like a ESPN broadcaster, said that when he was injured, Leach locked him in some hot warehouse, during practice and, put him in danger. And so it gets on the news in Lubbock, Texas, and in the newspapers in Lubbock, Texas, and so he gets fired. And Leach said, well, he didn't do it. The kid was lying. The kid was just making up crap about him, and that the kid was a troublemaker. And so he sued Texas Tech and like the local media, for libel and slander, but he lost. And here's the challenge of libel and slander. You've got to prove that it's hurting your reputation and that the media knows what they're saying is false. So if I say, if I pick some member of the class and I accuse you of having spent a month in West Virginia, all right, and then you say, well, I've never been to West Virginia. Well, even if I know you've never been to West Virginia, I don't get in trouble for that because there's nothing wrong. It doesn't hurt your reputation for going to West Virginia. All right, so it's got to be something that's really going to hurt your reputation. All right, and it's got to be a public figure. So again, you're not a public figure. So if we were in class right now, I said, well, hey, so-and-so went to West Virginia, everybody'd be going, well, so what? Number one. Number two, you're not printing it, publishing it anywhere. They're not a public figure. All right, and then finally, the hardest thing about it to prove is you've got to show I know I'm lying. All right, so hey, the National Enquirer almost never, sometimes they get sued, they almost never lose. The tabloids, when they get sued by somebody who says, hey, this stuff didn't happen, it's not enough to prove that what they said is false. You've got to prove that they know that it's just 100% false and that they're just making up crap about you. And so, generally speaking, the tabloids can say, well, this source for our story has given us good stories before that were true, so we find them to be credible. Also, hey, this part of the story was in fact true, so just because this part of it was false doesn't mean that we were lying. So it's a lot easier to sue tabloids in like Britain. They don't have, European countries don't have as much freedom of speech as we do. We have more freedom of expression than any of these other countries. And libel and slander is where you see that the most. All right. Okay, prior restraint. The government's not allowed to prevent publication of material beforehand. So in this case, it's the Pentagon Papers. The movie 2 years ago, I think, The Post. The Post was about the publication of the Pentagon Papers. And Pentagon Papers showed that, Johnson was lying about it. He knew he was lying. He knew that we weren't going to win, and he's talking about the body counts, and everybody's talking about how successful he's going to be, and they all know it's not true. And we know that this is a big deal because it kind of feeds that mistrust of government, kind of starts that mistrust of government. But when I believe the guy's name is Ellsberg, wants to publish it. Nixon administration tries to prevent the New York Times from publishing, the Washington Post from publishing further excerpts of what the New York Times had published already before Nixon found out that they had this thing. All right, and so it goes to the court, and the Supreme Court says, hey, if what they published turns out to be false, and you can show that they know it was false, well, you can get them for liable, but you can't prevent them beforehand. So that's a New York Times versus Sullivan is the court case. Let's get that on there. So New York Times, no, it's Washington Post. I need to look that one up. All right, I'm worried about my time, so I'll look that one up. But at any rate, prior restraint's the issue. Okay, so there's our stuff. Let me take a breath. Halfway there. All right, difference between libel and slander. Slander spoken, libel's written. Got to be about a public figure. You got to know that it's false, 100% false. All right, so the Pentagon Papers was the example, and they can't prevent publication. Okay, so we're moving out of the First Amendment here. That stinks. We could have had some real good talks about this. Well, we'll try to figure out a way. But let's move on then to due process. All right, so we're looking at procedural due process, and procedural due process is the steps the government's got to take if they're going to throw you in prison and leave you there, if they're going to take somebody's rights away. All right, so we're looking at the Fifth Amendment's due process clause, and it says the federal government shall deprive no person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. So military tribunals questionable under the Fifth Amendment. All right, because they hadn't, the folks in Guantanamo hadn't had the trial. All right, so that's one of the Sixth Amendment. Speedy trial is another way that they look at this. All right. Let me look and see what we got. All right. Well, the 14th Amendment applies it to the states. This is called selective incorporation. All right, so the states can't do this. The states, there's a due process clause to the 14th Amendment says the states can deprive no person, not just national government, but, if the states come and arrest you for no reason without giving you due process, they get in trouble as well. And it's really through this clause that the whole Bill of Rights gets applied to the state. So we'll see that again on another slide. All right, so there's due process back in, medieval times, whether somebody was accused of being a witch, they'd throw her in the river, and if she sunk, that meant she was innocent. If she floated, she was guilty, so then they'd burn her. I mean, it was there was a no-win situation, classic dilemma. So there was no due process back then. In the United States today, here's the procedural due process. All right. Okay. All right. So let's go back to substantive. All right. I think I skipped that. So substantive is something that liberals and conservatives on the court, originalists and activists on the court disagree on. So activists would say the Supreme Court can strike down any unfair law that's violating due process rights, because any unfair law kind of by nature deprives people of due process. And so conservatives say, well, that allows you to be an activist. Scalia would say there's no such thing as substantive due process. You can't just strike down a law that you don't like. You got to show that something in the Constitution is being violated. All right. So there's that. All right, I'm going to take a breath. All right, pause it. Let me go up here. And so that was number 3. That was number 2. That was number 1. Is that 4 of them? So we started here, didn't we? Yeah. So that's 1. That's 2. That's 3. And 4. All right. So, hey, I'm going to stop it because I've probably been going for a little while. Hopefully you're hearing this sometime this morning and not late this evening.